Anissa had always believed she would choose her own fate, until the night her father shattered that dream. The moon hung low over the village, casting silver shadows on the mud brick huts. Anissa sat outside her family's home, staring at the vast sky, her mind filled with dreams too big for the world she lived in. She had always imagined herself leaving the village one day, attending university in the city, and building a life of her own choosing. But that night, her father's voice cut through her thoughts like a blade. "You will be married in 3 days," he announced, his tone final. The words sent a chill through her bones. She turned to him, her heart pounding. "What do you mean? To whom?" "A good man, wealthy, from a respected family." Anissa's mother, who had been sitting silently, lowered her gaze. That was when Anissa knew this was not up for discussion. "I don't want to get married," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to continue my studies. I have plans." Her father's stern gaze silenced her. "Your plans mean nothing if they bring shame to this family. A woman's place is beside her husband, not chasing foolish dreams." Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She turned to her mother for support, but the older woman simply sighed. "It's for the best, my daughter." Anissa's stomach churned. She had always known that one day her parents would expect her to marry. But not like this. Not to a man she had never met. Not when she had spent years working toward a future she could now see slipping through her fingers. That night, she lay awake on the thin mattress in the small room she shared with her younger sister. Sleep would not come. Her thoughts raced. Who was this man? Why had he chosen her? And why had her parents agreed so easily? By morning, the entire village knew. Women whispered about how fortunate she was to marry a rich man. Men spoke of the alliance her marriage would bring. No one asked if she was happy. 3 days passed in a blur of preparations. Bright fabrics were draped over her shoulders, intricate beads were woven into her hair, and the scent of burning incense filled the air. Anissa watched it all as if she were outside her own body, trapped in a nightmare she could not wake from. On the day of the wedding, she stood before the village elders, her hands trembling as she accepted the ceremonial cup. Then she lifted her gaze and finally saw him, her husband-to-be. A tall man with piercing eyes, his expression unreadable. He did not smile. He did not reach for her hand. Anissa felt her chest tighten. Something about him was off. And as the ceremony continued, a single thought consumed her mind. Who was this stranger she was about to marry? The drums echoed through the village, their rhythmic beats vibrating in Anissa's chest as she sat motionless, draped in vibrant fabrics. The celebration was grand. Dancers twirled, women ululated, and men clapped in time with the music. Laughter and cheers filled the air, yet Anissa felt none of it. She felt only the cold weight of fate pressing down on her shoulders. At the center of it all sat Kofi, her new husband. He was tall, with sharp features and deep-set eyes that seemed to pierce through everything they looked at. His dark skin gleamed under the glow of the torches, and though people greeted him with respect, he remained quiet, nodding occasionally but never truly engaging. Even when he spoke, his words were measured, distant. Anissa stole glances at him throughout the night, searching for some sign of warmth, some indication of the man she had just bound herself to. But there was nothing. He never reached for her hand, never whispered reassurances like other grooms did to their brides. He simply watched, observed. She could feel the eyes of the villagers on her, expecting her to smile, to bask in the glory of marrying a wealthy man. But all she felt was trapped. As the night deepened, guests approached Kofi with bows and careful words. They spoke to him with the kind of reverence given to men of power, yet no one seemed to know much about him. "I heard he has businesses across the border," a woman whispered to another behind Anissa. "I heard he once lived in the city but left suddenly," another murmured. "No one truly knows where he came from," an elder added. The uncertainty in their voices made Anissa uneasy. A man so wealthy, so respected. Yet no one could say where he had come from or how he had gained his fortune. When the last of the guests left and the torches burned low, Kofi finally turned to her. "Come," he said simply. The single word sent a chill through her, not because it was harsh, but because it was devoid of emotion. She followed him through the village, her heart pounding. He led her toward a waiting carriage, an extravagant sight in a place where most travelled by foot. The horses stamped impatiently, their dark eyes reflecting the firelight. As she stepped inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into the unknown, into something much larger than herself. Kofi sat beside her, his face unreadable as the carriage moved forward, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. The village disappeared behind them, swallowed by the night. Beside her, her husband sat in silence, a stranger still. And as the wheels rolled over the dirt road, Anissa couldn't shake the feeling that she had just married a man with secrets buried deeper than she could ever imagine. The journey to Kofi's home felt endless. The further they travelled, the more the landscape changed. The dusty paths of her village gave way to wide roads, thick forests, and towering hills. Anissa sat in silence, her mind restless with questions she dared not ask. When the carriage finally stopped, she stepped out and froze. Before her stood a grand estate, larger than anything she had ever seen. The mansion's tall columns gleamed under the moonlight, its high walls casting long shadows. It felt less like a home and more like a fortress. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, and a group of servants rushed forward. They bowed their heads, avoiding direct eye contact with Kofi. Their movements were swift, almost nervous, as if they feared making a mistake. "Welcome, my lady," an older woman murmured, her voice respectful but tinged with something else, apprehension. Anissa followed Kofi inside, her footsteps echoing through the vast halls. The house was beautiful, with polished floors and golden chandeliers, but it felt cold, lifeless. There were no family portraits, no laughter, no warmth. As she explored her new home, she began to notice odd things. Certain doors remained locked at all times, their handles untouched by dust, as if someone regularly entered but never allowed anyone else inside. The servants whispered when they thought she wasn't listening, their voices tense, and every time Kofi entered a room, silence followed. One evening, as she wandered through the halls, she saw two servants speaking in hushed voices. They flinched when they saw her, immediately stepping back. "Is something wrong?" she asked, trying to sound calm despite the unease building in her chest. "No, my lady," one of them stammered, eyes darting toward the staircase. "We were just—" A door creaked open above them. Kofi stood at the top of the stairs, watching. The servants instantly bowed their heads and hurried away. Anissa swallowed hard. "Why do they fear you?" Kofi's expression remained unreadable. "They know their place." His answer did nothing to ease her growing suspicion. Days passed, and Anissa realized how isolated she truly was. She had no way to contact her family, no letters, no messengers, no visitors. The estate was surrounded by thick forests, miles away from the nearest village. Even if she tried to leave, where would she go? One night, unable to sleep, she stepped onto the balcony. The cool air soothed her, but the silence of the estate unsettled her. She glanced down and caught sight of something that sent a chill through her. In the moonlight, Kofi stood near the locked west wing of the mansion, speaking to a hooded figure. Their conversation was too low for her to hear, but the tension in their stance was unmistakable. As the figure disappeared into the shadows, Kofi turned his gaze upward, straight at her. Anissa gasped and stepped back, heart pounding. Who had she married? Anissa had always believed that silence could hold more power than words. And in Kofi's estate, silence was everywhere, thick, heavy, and filled with unspoken fears. Days passed, but she felt no closer to understanding the man she had married. The servants moved like shadows, careful never to linger too long in one place. When she asked about Kofi's past, they quickly changed the subject, their eyes darting nervously. Outside the estate, the villagers were no different. The few times she managed to leave the grounds, she noticed how people tensed at the mention of her husband's name. Conversations would halt, and glances would be exchanged as if some terrible secret lingered just beneath the surface. One afternoon, she approached an elderly woman selling woven baskets in the market. "Do you know my husband well?" Anissa asked, keeping her voice light. The woman's wrinkled hands froze mid-weave. "We know him enough," she murmured without looking up. "Enough to fear him?" Anissa pressed. The woman's eyes met hers then, sharp and filled with something unreadable. "Child, some things are better left unknown." That night, unable to shake the unease settling in her chest, Anissa roamed the halls of the estate. The flickering candlelight cast long, twisting shadows on the walls, mirroring the thoughts swirling in her mind. She passed by the kitchen and paused. From behind the half-open door she heard hushed voices. "Shouldn't have returned," one of the servants whispered. "The dead don't return," another replied. "But he did, and with blood on his hands." Anissa's breath caught. She pressed closer, straining to hear more. "They say he disappeared for years. No one knew if he was alive or dead. And when he came back..." A heavy silence followed. "Didn't you see the scars on his back?" the first voice continued. "Whatever happened to him changed him. He's not the same man." The floor creaked beneath Anissa's foot, and the voices stopped abruptly. She quickly stepped back into the shadows as the door swung open. A servant glanced around the hallway, his expression wary. After a long moment, he shut the door again. Anissa's heart pounded as she slipped away. Kofi had disappeared, for years, and returned covered in blood. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was he a fugitive? A warrior? Or something worse? That night, she lay awake beside the man whose past was a mystery. The steady rise and fall of his chest should have been comforting, but all she felt was the weight of the questions pressing down on her. She had been forced into this marriage, but now she had a choice to make. She could remain ignorant, living in quiet fear, or she could uncover the truth, no matter what it cost her. Anissa had learned to move quietly through the vast halls of the estate. Every shadow held a secret, every door hid something unseen. But one door, more than any other, called to her, the heavy wooden one at the end of the west wing. It was always locked, always off-limits, and it was the only place she had never seen Kofi enter or leave. One afternoon when Kofi rode out for business, Anissa decided she could no longer ignore the whispers of her own curiosity. The servants avoided this part of the house, so she moved undisturbed. She traced her fingers over the smooth wood, testing the handle. Locked. She glanced around, then reached into the folds of her dress, pulling out the small hairpin she had hidden earlier. Hands trembling, she inserted it into the keyhole, twisting carefully as she had seen the village boys do when they played tricks on their elders. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room. Dust floated in the stale air, settling over forgotten furniture. Shelves lined the walls filled with books and trinkets, but it was the large desk in the center that caught her attention. Stacks of old papers lay scattered across its surface. A wooden box sat slightly open, revealing a glint of metal inside. With cautious steps, Anissa moved forward, her gaze falling upon a faded newspaper clipping pinned to the wall. The headline sent a shiver down her spine. Her eyes darted to the photograph beneath it. A young man stood tall in regal attire, his sharp features undeniable. Her breath hitched. The face staring back at her was Kofi's. Impossible. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through more newspapers, all telling the same story. A prince betrayed. An ambush in the dead of night. A missing body, assumed lost to the river's depths. Yet he was here, alive. She turned to the desk, her hands moving on their own, searching for more answers. In the bottom drawer, she found something that made her blood run cold. A long, dark coat folded neatly. She lifted it and a sharp gasp escaped her lips. Blood. Stained deep into the fabric, dried and dark. A sharp sound from outside jolted her back to reality, the distant echo of hooves. Kofi was returning. Panic surged through her. She shoved the papers back into place, carefully placing the coat where she had found it. With quick, measured steps, she slipped out of the room, locking the door behind her just as she heard footsteps in the corridor. She rushed back to her chambers, heart hammering. Kofi was not just a stranger. He was a man the world believed to be dead. And she, his wife, was now tangled in a secret far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Anissa could no longer hold the truth inside her. The weight of what she had discovered pressed against her chest like a heavy stone. That night, as Kofi sat in his study, she stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "I know who you are," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Kofi's pen froze mid-stroke. Slowly he looked up, his dark eyes unreadable. "Do you?" She took a deep breath. "I found the room, the newspapers, the blood-stained coat." She hesitated, but then forced the words out. "You are the prince they declared dead." For the first time she saw something flicker in his expression, something raw, unguarded. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "So, you know." His voice was low, measured. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "No more secrets." A long silence stretched between them before Kofi finally spoke. "I was once the heir to the Ashanti kingdom, the next in line to rule." His fingers traced the edge of the desk, as if pulling memories from its surface. But power breeds enemies, even within one's own blood. Anissa's stomach twisted. "Your brother?" Kofi gave a slow nod. "Kwame. My own flesh and blood. He wanted the throne for himself. One night he arranged an ambush. My guards were killed, and I was left for dead." He lifted his shirt slightly, revealing the faint scars on his back, marks of blades that had failed to end his life. "They threw my body into the river, thinking it would carry me away. But you survived," Anissa whispered. "I did." His jaw tightened. "A fisherman found me miles downstream, barely breathing. He nursed me back to health, but I could never return, not as myself. If my enemies knew I was alive, they would finish what they started." Anissa's mind reeled. "So, you took a new identity?" He nodded. "I built a new life, gathering allies in secret, waiting for the right time to reclaim what was mine." His gaze hardened. "This marriage, our marriage, was never about love, Anissa. It was about securing alliances, strengthening my position before I make my move." Anissa felt as if the floor beneath her had vanished. "So I was just part of your plan?" His expression softened, but he didn't deny it. "You weren't supposed to know." A bitter laugh escaped her. "And what happens to me now that I do?" Kofi stood, closing the space between them. His presence was overwhelming, his gaze intense. "That depends," he said quietly. "Now that you know the truth, will you stand with me?" Anissa searched his face, looking for the man she had married, the man she had feared, the man she now saw in a new, terrifying light. She had been forced into this marriage, but now she had a choice, and whatever she decided could change the fate of a kingdom. Anissa couldn't sleep. Kofi's words echoed in her mind, his confession, his plea. He had built their marriage on deception, yet now he asked for her loyalty. Could she give it? She sat by the window, staring at the darkened courtyard below. The estate was silent, but she could feel the weight of unseen dangers pressing in. Kofi's enemies were out there, waiting. A soft knock at the door made her tense. She turned to see Kofi standing in the dim light, his expression unreadable. "You haven't left this room since our conversation," he said quietly. She folded her arms. "You expect me to go on as if nothing has changed?" "No," he admitted, "but I need to know where you stand." She searched his face, looking for any sign of the man she could trust. "You married me for political gain. You never told me who you really were. And now, after everything, you want me to stand by your side?" Kofi exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I never meant to deceive you like this. but I couldn't risk telling you until I was sure. Sure of what? His eyes softened. That I could trust you, that you wouldn't betray me like my own brother did. The words hit her harder than she expected. He had been betrayed before, left for dead. And now he feared she would do the same. Anissa looked away. And what about me? Do you trust me? Kofi hesitated. I want to. She shook her head. That's not enough. A sudden noise from outside made them both freeze. A distant shout. The sound of hurried footsteps. Kofi moved instantly, striding toward the door. Stay here! But Anissa was already following him. Number. If I'm part of this, I need to know what's happening. They reached the balcony overlooking the courtyard just as a guard rushed forward. My lord, riders approach from the east. Armed men. Kofi's expression darkened. Kwame's men. A chill ran down Anissa's spine. The danger was no longer distant. It was here. Kofi turned to her, his voice urgent. There's no more time to question my past. You must decide. Do you stand with me? Or do you leave? Her heart pounded. She had spent days questioning her place in this marriage, but now, standing at the edge of war, there was no room for doubt. She met his gaze. I need to know one thing. Do you truly care for me, or am I just another piece on your board? For the first time, Kofi looked uncertain. Then, quietly, he said, At first, you were part of the plan, but now I can't imagine facing this without you. The truth lay between them, raw and unspoken. Outside, the enemy closed in. Inside, Anissa faced her own battle. Was she ready to fight for a man who had lied to her? Or was it too late to turn back? Anissa had spent her life believing she would never have a choice. First, she had been forced into a marriage she didn't want. Then, she had uncovered a truth too dangerous to ignore. And now, she stood at the edge of a battlefield, knowing that whatever decision she made would shape her future forever. She had considered leaving, running back to her village, to the life she had once known. But that life was gone. Kofi's enemies knew who she was now. If she left, they would find her. And if they found her, they would kill her. She clenched her fists. If there was no escape, then there was only one option. She would fight. The estate was alive with tension as Kofi's men prepared for battle. Swords were sharpened, arrows knocked, and hushed orders were given. Anissa stood beside Kofi, watching the eastern horizon where the torches of approaching riders burned against the night. This isn't your fight, Kofi said, his voice low. She turned to him, her eyes burning with resolve. It is now. A flicker of something, pride, admiration, crossed his face. Then, before he could speak, the first arrow flew. The night exploded into chaos. Kwame's men stormed the gates, their war cries echoing through the estate. Kofi's warriors clashed with them in a violent dance of steel and blood. Anissa had never seen battle before, but she didn't have time to be afraid. She grabbed a dagger from a fallen soldier and moved, staying close to Kofi as he fought his way forward. And then, through the smoke and flashing blades, she saw him. Kwame. He was dressed in royal armor, his face twisted with the cruel satisfaction of a man who believed he had already won. He cut through Kofi's men with precision, his sword dripping with fresh blood. Kofi stepped forward, his voice carrying above the chaos. Face me, brother. Kwame smirked. You should have stayed dead. Their swords met with a ringing clash. The brothers fought with a fury only possible between men who had once shared the same blood. Every strike was personal. Every movement was a reflection of their past. Anissa watched, heart hammering, until she saw something that made her blood run cold. Kwame's hand slipped beneath his cloak, a dagger, small, hidden, and aimed for Kofi's unguarded side. Without thinking, Anissa moved. She lunged forward, driving her own dagger into Kwame's arm just as he struck. He cried out, his blade missing its mark. Kofi seized the opportunity, knocking him to the ground and pressing his sword to his throat. For a moment, everything was still. Kwame glared up, breathing hard. Go on. he spat. End it. Kofi hesitated. Anissa stepped closer, voice steady. You decide your fate, Kofi, not him. The night held its breath, waiting for the fallen prince's choice. The battlefield was drenched in firelight and blood. The estate walls, once a symbol of Kofi's hidden past, now bore witness to the fight that would determine his future. Warriors clashed, steel ringing against steel, but all eyes were drawn to the heart of the battle, Kofi and Kwame. The brothers circled each other, blades glinting in the torchlight. Years of betrayal, anger, and vengeance simmered between them, ready to explode. You were never meant to rule, Kwame sneered, his grip tightening on his sword. You were weak then, and you're weak now. Kofi didn't respond with words. He lunged. Their swords met with a resounding clash, the force of their strikes sending sparks into the air. Kofi fought with precision and control, but Kwame fought with raw brutality, every swing meant to kill. Anissa stood at the edge of the battlefield, gripping the dagger she had taken from a fallen soldier. She knew Kofi was skilled, but Kwame had the advantage of experience. He had spent years securing his power through bloodshed. She had to act. Scanning the battlefield, she spotted a group of Kwame's warriors sneaking toward Kofi's flank, ready to strike the moment his back was turned. Her pulse quickened. Running toward Kofi's archers, she grabbed the nearest bow and called out, "Aim for the traitors on the left, now!" The archers hesitated only for a moment before following her command. A volley of arrows cut through the air, striking down the ambushers before they could reach Kofi. Kofi, unaware of the danger he had narrowly escaped, pressed his advantage against Kwame. He knocked his brother's sword aside and drove him back step by step. Kwame, now desperate, pulled a hidden dagger from his belt and slashed wildly. The blade caught Kofi's arm, drawing blood. He staggered slightly, but before Kwame could strike again, Anissa acted. She hurled her dagger with everything she had. It struck Kwame's shoulder, forcing him to drop his blade. He roared in pain, eyes blazing with fury as he turned toward her. That moment of distraction was all Kofi needed. With a final decisive strike, he disarmed Kwame completely and forced him to his knees. The battlefield grew silent as Kofi pressed his sword to his brother's throat. Kwame glared up at him, breathing hard. "Go on," he spat. "Finish it." Kofi's grip tightened. The man before him had stolen his throne, taken his family, and nearly cost him his life. Killing him would be justice. But then he looked at Anissa. She shook her head, her gaze steady. "A true king doesn't rule with vengeance," she said softly. Kofi exhaled sharply. Then, to everyone's shock, he stepped back. "You are no longer my brother," he said coldly. "You will stand trial for your crimes." Victory was his, but it had come at a cost. And now, a new future awaited them all. The sun rose over the kingdom, casting golden light over the palace that had once been stolen from Kofi. Now, after years of exile, betrayal, and battle, he stood within its walls, not as a fugitive, but as its rightful ruler. The people gathered in the courtyard, their murmurs of uncertainty turning to cheers as Kofi stepped forward. He had been a ghost, a legend whispered in fear, but now he was real, standing before them as their king. Anissa watched from the edge of the crowd, her heart full of emotions she couldn't yet name. She had spent so long believing she had no control over her life. Forced into a marriage she didn't choose, thrown into a world of secrets and danger. And yet, through it all, she had found something unexpected. A purpose. A place where she belonged. Not as a prisoner, but as someone who had fought for her own destiny. Kofi's voice rang through the courtyard, strong and steady. For too long this kingdom has suffered under the rule of a traitor. Today, that ends. The people erupted into applause. Anissa could see the hope in their eyes, the relief of a future that no longer belonged to a tyrant. Kofi turned then, his gaze finding hers across the distance. For a moment the world around them faded. She had a choice now. She could return to her village, to the life she had once dreamed of before everything changed. She was no longer bound to this place, to this man. She was free. But as she looked at Kofi, the man who had once been a stranger, a mystery, a force she had feared, she saw something else. She saw the man who had fought not just for his throne, but for his people. The man who had learned to trust her, who had stood beside her when the battle raged. The man she had come to love. The realization settled over her like the warmth of the morning sun. Kofi stepped closer, uncertainty flickering in his usually steady eyes. "Anissa, you are free to go," he said softly. "I won't keep you here if you wish to leave." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. "I'm not staying because I have to," she said. "I'm staying because I choose to." A slow smile spread across Kofi's face, one of quiet understanding and something deeper, something neither of them had expected when their paths first crossed. The crowd around them cheered as Kofi raised her hand, declaring her not just his wife, but his queen. Anissa stood beside him, no longer a forced bride, no longer a woman without choices. She had chosen her fate, and this was only the beginning.